Welcome to this deep dive. And today we're going to be exploring something that might just revolutionize how you learn.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the power of storytelling. You're someone who values efficient learning.
Mm-hmm.
And today we're really going to be unpacking a technique that goes way beyond just surface level memorization.
Well, what I think is fascinating about storytelling is that it really leverages something that is fundamental to how humans have always learned and transmitted knowledge,
Yeah.
for millennia, long before written language.
Right?
Stories were the primary vessels of information, passing down wisdom, cultural practices,
Hmm.
survival skills across
It's
generations.
like we're wired for it.
Exactly.
And now research is catching up to what we've kind of instinctively known all along.
Yeah.
So let's jump right in because we've got some compelling studies, practical examples, even a thought-provoking YouTube
Oh,
video
wow.
on our list today.
Okay.
Our mission is to really dissect how storytelling can amplify your learning no matter the subject.
And we're not just going to be talking about the what of it. We're going to be uncovering the why behind its effectiveness
Exactly.
and hopefully equip you with some tools to make this technique your own.
I love it. Okay, let's start with the science.
Hmm.
One study really caught my eye. It found that simply reading a novel can trigger lasting changes in brain activity.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't just a fleeting effect. These changes persisted for days.
So this study was from Emory University, and they used fMRI scans to observe participants' brains while they were engrossed in a thriller novel. And what they discovered was that the areas of the brain related to physical sensation and movement were activated.
Wow.
Even though the readers were physically still,
Oh, wow.
it was as if they were embodying the protagonist's experience.
So it's not just passive reading. Our brains are actively simulating the actions and feelings described in the story.
Exactly.
It's a level of immersion that goes beyond just understanding the words on the page.
Precisely. And this is where it gets really relevant for learning. Similar effects have been observed with auditory storytelling, like lectures, presentations, or even this deep dive.
That makes sense. When we listen to a story, especially a well-told one, we naturally visualize the scenes we connect with the characters.
Yeah.
We anticipate what's coming next. We're actively engaged in constructing that narrative world in our minds.
This active processing is key to the phenomenon researchers call transportation. It's that feeling of being completely absorbed in a story, almost like you've stepped into a different reality.
I love that.
And when we're in that transported state, our ability to remember and comprehend the material skyrockets.
Wow.
It's like the information is no longer just abstract concepts.
Right.
It's part of a lived experience,
Yeah.
making it much stickier in our memories.
That is a powerful insight. It explains why we might remember a vivid historical anecdote years later, while the dates and names from a textbook just fade away. But I'm curious, how does this neurological magic translate to learning specific skills?
Yeah.
I can see how it works for history or literature, but what about something like language acquisition?
That's a great question. And you're right to point out that the application might not be immediately obvious for every subject. However, there is a growing body of research demonstrating the benefits of storytelling in language learning. Specifically, for instance, one comprehensive literature review summarized numerous studies highlighting how storytelling boosts learner motivation.
Hold on, before we dive into the details of those studies, I think it's worth pausing to unpack. WHY storytelling can be so motivating, particularly for language learners.
Right.
It can't just be the entertainment factor, right?
You're absolutely right. It goes deeper than mere entertainment. Storytelling taps into our innate desire for meaning making and connection when we encounter new language within a compelling narrative. It's no longer just a collection of arbitrary sounds and grammar rules. It becomes a tool to understand characters' emotions and events. And this sense of purpose makes the learning process feel much more relevant and engaging.
It's like the difference between memorizing vocabulary lists and actually using those words to share an experience or express an idea. It makes the learning feel less like a chore and more like a key to unlocking a new world.
Exactly. And this ties into another key benefit highlighted in that literature review. Storytelling provides what's called comprehensible input.
Okay.
To put it simply, comprehensible input is language presented in a way that's easy to grasp because it's embedded in a relatable context instead of isolated sentences. Learners encounter language as it's naturally used with all its nuances and subtleties.
So it's like learning by osmosis, but with an engaging story as the catalyst. Instead of focusing on rote memorization, the language becomes almost incidental, absorbed naturally as we follow the narrative.
Precisely. And the research shows that this approach leads to improvements not just in vocabulary, but across all language skills. Speaking, listening, and reading. Some studies even suggest that storytelling can be more effective than traditional teaching methods in certain contexts.
Now that's a bold claim. Could you give us an example of a study that demonstrated this, something that might resonate with our listeners who are trying to master a new language?
Certainly, one study that stands out involved adult ESL learners. The researchers divided the participants into two groups. One group learned through traditional textbook exercises and drills, while the other group engaged with storytelling activities. The results were striking. The storytelling group demonstrated significantly greater improvement in their language skills across the board. They were not only able to communicate more fluently, but also showed a deeper understanding of grammatical structures and vocabulary usage.
Wow, that's compelling evidence for the power of stories. But before we get too carried away with language learning, I'm curious to know if this applies to other areas as well. Is storytelling a universal learning booster, or is it more specific to certain subjects?
That's an excellent question, and it leads us to a really exciting area of exploration. While language learning is a fantastic example, the benefits of storytelling extend far beyond mastering a new tongue. It's a versatile tool applicable to diverse fields and skills.
Okay, you've piqued my curiosity. Do you have any specific examples of how storytelling can enhance learning in areas that might not seem inherently story-driven?
Absolutely. There's a fascinating study conducted with Malaysian university students that focused on using storytelling to improve not only language skills, but also overall communication effectiveness. And what's intriguing is that the improvements extended beyond just language proficiency. They also saw a significant boost in their confidence and presentation skills.
Now that you mention it, I recall seeing this study mentioned in our research materials, but honestly, when I first skimmed it, I was a bit skeptical. Improving confidence and delivery through storytelling, it seemed like a bit of a stretch. Can you elaborate on how this intervention worked and why it was so successful?
So the researchers took a structured approach implementing a three-cycle storytelling intervention.
Okay.
It started with a phase called Tell It Ugly, where students focus simply on getting the core content of their story out. No pressure for perfect grammar or eloquent language. The goal was to capture the essence of their narrative.
Tell it ugly. I love that it takes the pressure off perfectionism, which can be such a learning killer. I can imagine that this initial phase helped students overcome their fear of making mistakes and allowed them to tap into their creative flow more freely.
Exactly. It created a safe space for experimentation and ideation, allowing the raw material of the story to emerge without self-censorship. Then they moved on to the Make It Better phase. Here, students revisited their initial drafts, refining the language structure and adding more detail and nuance.
So it's an iterative process, building upon each layer of the story, kind of like sculpting clay. You start with a rough form and gradually refine it into something more polished and intricate.
That's a great analogy, and this iterative process is key to internalizing the learning by revisiting their stories, refining the language, and experimenting with different ways to express their ideas. Students were actively engaging with the material on multiple levels, reinforcing their understanding and building their communication skills.
Okay, so tell it ugly to get the creative juices flowing, then make it better to refine and solidify. What was the final stage of this storytelling transformation?
The culmination was the bringing the story to life phase,
Okay.
which is where things get really exciting here. Students went beyond just the words on the page. They incorporated nonverbal communication, infused their stories with emotion, and even converted parts of the narrative into dialogues, bringing characters to life through voice and expression.
Wow, so they really went all in on embodying their stories. It sounds like this phase helped them connect with the emotional core of their narratives, making them more impactful and engaging for both the storyteller and the audience.
Precisely. And what's remarkable is that this approach, even in simplified form, can be incredibly useful for any learning task. Think about it, when we can transform information into a compelling narrative, we're not just memorizing facts, we're creating an experience.
That makes a lot of sense. But honestly, when I think of subjects like math or science, it's hard to imagine finding those engaging narratives. Those fields seem so inherently factual objective. And, well, let's face it, sometimes a bit dry. How can we uncover those hidden stories within subjects that don't appear inherently story-like?
That's a challenge many people face, but it's where things get really interesting. There are narratives woven into the fabric of every subject, even the seemingly dry ones. Sometimes these narratives are explicitly stated, while other times they're hidden beneath the surface waiting to be uncovered. For example, I recall our YouTube video source mentioning a math textbook that cleverly introduced a chapter on coordinate geometry with lines of poetry linking seemingly abstract mathematical concepts to the realms of literature and history.
That's a fantastic example. It challenges the assumption that math is purely about formulas and calculations, revealing a deeper connection to human creativity and expression. It's like finding a secret passageway into a whole new world of understanding. Suddenly, a subject that once felt intimidating or boring becomes engaging and memorable. But how can we do this consistently? How can we learn to spot those hidden narratives?
It starts with shifting our perspective and embracing curiosity instead of approaching a subject with the mindset of, I need to learn this. Try asking yourself, what story is this information trying to tell? Look for the underlying themes, the connections, the human element.
So instead of just passively absorbing facts and figures, we become active storytellers, searching for the narrative threads that connect those seemingly disparate pieces of information.
Exactly. And once you start looking for them, you'll be amazed at how many stories you can uncover. For instance, scientific discoveries are often presented as linear progressions, but in reality, they're filled with moments of serendipity setbacks and unexpected breakthroughs. Each discovery has a backstory, a human drama that makes it far more compelling than a dry textbook explanation.
And in the business world, stories can bridge the gap between abstract theories and real-world applications. Instead of just memorizing marketing frameworks or financial models, we can learn how those concepts played out in real-life situations. With all their complexities and nuances, suddenly those dry concepts become relatable and applicable to our own challenges.
You're getting it. History, too, comes alive when we shift our focus from memorizing dates and names to understanding the human stories that shaped events. Each historical figure had motivations, dreams, and struggles. Each battle, invention, or social movement was driven by a complex interplay of personalities and circumstances. By delving into those stories, we gain a deeper appreciation for the forces that have shaped our world.
Even in our personal lives, a simple anecdote can make a profound impact. We've all had those aha moments when a friend shares a personal story that illuminates a complex concept or helps us reframe a challenging situation. It's like that saying, a good story can take you to a faraway land, but a great story can bring that land to you.
Beautifully put, it highlights the transformative power of storytelling, its ability to bridge the gap between abstract knowledge and lived experience. So you see, storytelling isn't limited to any one subject. It's a universal key that can unlock deeper learning in any field, from science and math to business history and even personal growth.
Okay, I'm convinced storytelling is a superpower we can all tap into. But let's get practical. What are the key elements of a truly effective learning story? What makes a story stick and resonate with our minds long after we've encountered it?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? What transforms a simple anecdote into a powerful learning tool? Well, a few key elements come to mind.
Okay.
Firstly, relatable characters. We need to connect with the individuals driving the narrative, feel their struggles, celebrate their triumphs.
It's that human connection that draws us in, right?
Right.
It makes the information feel less abstract and more relevant to our own lives.
Exactly. We're wired for empathy. We want to understand what makes people tick, what motivates them, how they overcome challenges. And when we see ourselves reflected in those characters, even if it's just a glimmer of recognition, the story becomes much more impactful.
So relatable characters are key. What else should we be looking for?
A clear plot, of course.
Okay.
A story needs a sense of direction, a trajectory that takes us on a journey. There should be a challenge or a problem to be solved, obstacles to overcome, and ultimately a resolution, whether it's a triumphant victory or a thought-provoking lesson learned.
It's like that classic storytelling arc, rising action, climax, falling action, resolution. It creates a sense of anticipation and keeps us engaged as we follow the protagonist's journey. But there's got to be more to it than just a well-structured plot. What truly elevates a story from entertaining to transformative?
You're touching on a crucial element, emotional resonance. The most effective learning stories evoke feelings, tap into our hopes and fears, and make us care about the outcome. Think about the stories that have stayed with you long after you've encountered them. They likely sparked an emotion, whether it was joy, sadness, anger, or even a sense of wonder.
Yeah, it's that emotional connection that cements the learning, isn't it? It transforms information from something we passively absorb to something we experience viscerally. It's like the difference between reading about a historical event and feeling the weight of its impact on the lives of real people.
Precisely. And here's the exciting part. We can actively cultivate this emotional resonance as we learn it. It starts with a shift in mindset. Instead of approaching learning as a passive process of information absorption, we can become active storytellers, weaving narratives around the concepts we're trying to grasp.
So what you're saying is don't just consume information, transform.
Yeah.
Look for those hidden stories, those human connections, those emotional threads that bring the material to life.
Absolutely. And remember, the three-cycle approach we discussed earlier, tell it ugly, make it better, bring it to life. Don't get bogged down in perfectionism. Just start telling the story, even if it's messy and imperfect at first, then refine it, add layers, infuse it with emotion. It's through this iterative process that the learning truly takes hold.
It's like that famous quote often attributed to Hemingway: "The first draft of anything is shit." We need to silence our inner critics, embrace the messiness of the creative process, and trust that the story will emerge as we continue to shape and refine it.
And here's a thought: we can apply this approach not just to academic subjects or professional skills, but to our personal lives as well. Think about the stories we tell ourselves about our experiences, our relationships, our successes and failures. By becoming more conscious of those narratives, we can
Yeah.
challenge limiting beliefs, reframe setbacks as learning opportunities, and ultimately craft a more empowering story for our lives.
That's a powerful insight. It highlights how storytelling isn't just a learning tool, it's a tool for self-discovery and growth. But for listeners who are eager to put this into practice, are there any resources you recommend for honing their storytelling skills?
There's a wealth of resources out there, from books and workshops on the art of storytelling to podcasts and online communities where you can connect with fellow storytellers and share your work. The possibilities are endless. And don't underestimate the power of simply observing the master storytellers around you. Pay attention to how novelists, filmmakers, even skilled conversationalists craft compelling narratives. There's always something to learn from those who have mastered the art of weaving words into magic.
That's excellent advice. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of storytelling and learning, let's leave our listeners with a final thought-provoking question. What stories are you already using to learn and understand the world?
Think about the books you read, the movies you watch, the conversations you have. Stories are everywhere, shaping our perceptions and influencing how we learn now that you're aware of their power. How can you become a more conscious and skilled storyteller? How can you use stories to deepen your own learning experiences and perhaps even share your unique perspective with the world?
Maybe it's starting a storytelling club with friends where you can share and discuss the narratives that have resonated with you. Or perhaps it's incorporating storytelling techniques into your work presentations, breathing life into those dry reports and making your ideas more memorable.
The possibilities are truly limitless, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Reach out to the show and share your own experiences and insights into the power of storytelling. Because ultimately, we're all storytellers weaving narratives that shape our understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
By embracing this power, we unlock a world of deeper understanding, connection, and endless learning. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and keep those stories coming.